This is Jeff Johnson, and he's an assistant professor of computer science here at USF. In the tradition of Piero Scaruffi, who does no introductions at all, I'll basically do that too. I'll let you introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself, okay? Let's see, he's also a principal at Wiser Usability, a consultancy focused on elder usability, and that's really what his talk's going to be on. So that's my introduction.
Okay, I'm going to plug this in, which is going to make me not be able to move outside of this area. Been here since about a little over a year ago in the computer science department. But don't tell anyone, but I'm actually a psychologist pretending to be a computer scientist. Because my degrees are in psych. And so if you want to know how I got from psych into computer science, we can talk about that at the break. Someone else coming in? Okay, so this talk that I'm going to give tonight is based on a book that I co-wrote with co-author Dr. Kate Finn, and this book was published in March. It's called Designing User Interfaces for an Aging Population Towards Universal Design. So this is a very brief overview of some of the topics that are covered in the book, but if you want more information, there's a flyer up there. You can also, there's copies of the book that I brought for you to look at. I also brought another book that I've written a couple of years ago called Designing with the Mind in Mind, which is about how the brain works and how human perception works, and how that says that we should design computer software. So let's get into tonight's talk. The main topic here is that the world's population is aging. We're all aging. But the world's population as a whole is aging, especially in the developed world. People live longer now, birth rates are lower, and so humanity on the average is getting older. So let's check some statistics. So these are the top 10 countries with the highest number of people aged 50 or over, as of 2015. The source is the United Nations. So China has almost 400 million people over the age of 50. India is the next most populous country with approximately 230,000 people over, million people over the age of 50, and then the United States is third, Japan is next, etc. So, and these bars are getting larger every day. There are about 10,000 people in the United States who turn 50 every day. Okay, so another way of looking at the world's population and how it's aging is this. So what this shows is in less developed regions of the world, we've got, in less developed regions of the world, you have higher birth rates and lower life expectancy. So the percentage of older people is lower, but it's still not insignificant. It's still pretty significant. So in 2015, the last time it was really measured, it was about 20% of the population in the developing world is over 50. Now you can see in the developed world, the darker bars, it's closer to 40%. And then what we're looking at is how it's projected to grow to 2025 and 2035. So soon, basically in the developed world, we'll have over 40% of the population is over 50. Here's another way to look at this. Some say that older adults don't go online, but statistics show that they do increasingly. And in fact, if you look at these different age groups, This is the youngest set. They've pretty much been online since they were born, and but it's flattening out because it can't go any higher. And the 60, here we have the next age group, which is 30 to 49, and the next age group, which is 50 to 54, and the next one, which is 60 to 65. And as you can see, this is the fastest growing group. Now, this is a kind of a problematic, it's both an informative graph, but it also has its problems, which is that this doesn't really, these lines don't really represent separate groups of people, because people on this chart, on this line, eventually become people digital technology. When we say tech, we mean digital tech, because of course everything is tech. A horse and buggy is tech. It's just tech from 100 years ago, right? So when we say tech here, what we mean is digital technology. So tech adoption among millennials is almost 100%. It goes down as people, as you look at older and older generations, birth generations. So we have the silent generation, which is my parents, basically. Now look at that number. That number is 60%. So it's not true that those old people, whoever those old people are, and by the way, if you ask, the AARP has determined that if you ask people who is old, it's always 10 years older than you. That is, nobody is old, only their parents are old, whatever age you ask them. Okay, so anyway, here's the silent generation. 60% of them are using some kind of digital technology, and it goes up as you get younger cohorts. Another way to break it down is in terms of what technology or what kind of devices people will use. So if you look at tablets, around 40% of people in various age categories use it, and you can see that there's a difference in age, but overall it's not that great. Same is true of cell phones. So if you look at all cell phones, including flip phones, and sort of older cell phones, there's really not that much difference. Around 80% of everyone has a cell phone. It does change a little bit as you look at younger cohorts, but it's more or less the same. Whereas if you look at smartphones, there's a big age difference. So if you take out the flip phones and the old cell phones, and just look at smartphones, the older age groups have been slower to adopt those, but this bar is rapidly going up. It's going up every day. Well, the irony of digital technology is that it can help older adults a lot, because older adults typically have less mobility and limited, basically limited ways of getting around, and so being able to communicate with other people online and also to be able to shop online and things like that would be a great boon for older adults if we designed the technology correctly. Here are some comments from older adults that were captured from online sources. So this person said, a Mac laptop opened the world to me right here from my kitchen table. This is a blessing because my mobility is now extremely limited due to my physical disability. Somebody else says, I can keep in touch with people all over the world. I feel so connected to much of the world, art, music, nature, comedy, humanity. Technology's helped me move 19 times in the past 9 years, taking everything with me. I can't imagine going back to life without a computer. So that's what technology, digital technology can offer to older adults, and those things are all good. But the problem is, if the equipment is poorly designed for those people, specifically, you get comments like these, which we've also seen. How can I make the font bigger? I can't see it. I wish they'd stop changing things. All the new technology is just so confusing to me. Who thought thin gray letters was a good idea? So much to remember. What happened to the menus? I don't know where to get help. Is this a website or an app? Where did my cursor go? Okay, so So these are all comments that we've seen coming in from various studies. And so here are some of the problems that older adults experience. This is an enumeration off the top of our heads. Illegible text, passwords, lost objects, hard to solve CAPTCHAs. Does anyone even know what a CAPTCHA is? Mysterious symbols, small targets, confusing navigation, not understanding where the focus is, frequent updates and changes, difficulty getting tech support, too much information, distracting or overwhelming. So let me show you a couple of examples quickly. So here we have an example of Road Scholar. How many of you have heard of Road Scholar? Road Scholar is a travel service that actually targets adults over 50. And a study of that, their website has determined that there's many problems with their website in terms of people, older adults, using it in order to be able to book trips. What we found, grossly speaking, is that older adults the people in their target audience can use this site to find out what trips exist, but they will not or cannot book on it. They just get on the phone. Okay. But here's one of the reasons. If you're down here and you're looking at a trip and it's February 27, 2016, November 4th, that's the dates of the trip, and you decide, you know, actually those dates don't work for me, I want to change them. So you change the dates. You go, okay, those dates are more to my liking, but you didn't notice that the price just went up by $300 over here. Because the price is over here, and this is where you're looking, right? You're changing your dates, you've actually changed the price, but you're not going to notice that. And by the way, that might even happen if you were 25. Here's another example. Somebody is trying to, I think this is Grand Circle, or this is another travel website aimed at people over 50. And this person is trying to book a trip, find a trip to Kenya, and she's having trouble with her hand-eye coordination and those menus. So listen to this.
So like I went up here to, get a country first, and then up here to Okay, so when it's taking me 5 times.
So the menu keeps disappearing out from under her cursor, and she's having trouble sort of reaching it. Okay, here's another example. Someone who is just getting overwhelmed by this. This is an experienced traveler, but not someone who's used to digital technology.
Maybe.
This point.
Turn the sound down on your computer.
This is overwhelming.
Sorry?
I don't know, is that the problem?
It's coming out of these speakers and that speaker right there.
And you have to tell the computer which speaker.
Oh, well, here we are, over 50.
What I can do is press. What? Okay, let me start it. Yeah.
This point. This is overwhelming. I would call and say, help.
Okay, for some reason we're getting a delay out of there. Okay, and then finally I want to show you this one. This is someone who was so frustrated she's ready to give up.
So at this point, if you were, really looking at your trip, what would you do next if you were here?
I would say, if I can't get what I want in reasonable tries, then I want to go to this country.
So they just lost a customer. Well, the British researcher who studies older adults and the uses of technology named Alan Newell says if you design for older adults, you design for almost everyone else. So there are lots of people who have similar usability issues. That is, people with low vision, people with low literacy, people with little technology experience. Some of my students here at USF don't know the difference between Wi-Fi and cellular service. So it's not like everyone is technology savvy. Okay, those with obsolete technical experience, we'll talk about that in a minute. Second language learners and certain people with cognitive impairments. So as he said, design for older adults and design for everyone else. And so even young people can have trouble in some situations. One way of putting it is that we are all disabled or will be at some time. Not only we will be at some time in the future, but we also can be temporarily disabled by certain conditions. So let's say we're on a bus trying to use our cell phone. Okay, and the bus is bouncing along Masonic, right? Masonic is all torn up right now. Imagine being on a bus and trying to use your cell phone on Masonic. It would be difficult. So you can be situationally given hand tremors, essentially. Or if you're trying to use your cell phone while riding a horse, you know, it can be difficult under those circumstances, no matter how young you are. It can be, you know, it's a situation, the world shakes. So basically what we're looking for in design of technology is the electronic digital equipment of curb cuts. If you think about curb cuts were put in because they were mandated by state and local laws, and in some cases federal laws. And so they were put in for the benefit of people in wheelchairs. But what percentage of people who actually use curb cuts are people in wheelchairs? A very low percentage, it turns out, right? Because most of the people who use curb cuts and find them valuable are people on skateboards, people pushing shopping carts, people pulling rolling bags, people pushing strollers, people pulling wagons, okay? So most of the people who actually value curb cuts are not the people they were mandated for. And so what we're looking for is ways to design that will help older adults and bring them, not exclude them, essentially bring them into the mainstream of technology use, but not push away the younger people. Another example of that kind of thinking is in the tools OXO. Who uses the OXO line of kitchen tools? So basically where OXO got its start was this guy who was a designer, had a wife who had arthritis. And so she couldn't use the peeler. And so he made her a peeler that would fit her hand and was more comfortable to use. And his friend said, hey, I want one of those. And the other friend said, I want one of those. And his cousin said, I want one of those. He started making more of them, and then a business was born. Okay, so basically you can design technology that's for a specific audience, let's say older adults or maybe handicapped people or something like that. It turns out it might actually help more people than you think it will. Another argument that's often heard when people are talking about designing technology for older adults is, you know, all those old people are going to die soon anyway, and so we don't really have to worry about this. We don't need to design technology for older adults because soon they'll all be dead and everyone will be young and they all know how to use technology since they were babies, and the problem will go away by itself. And the problem is that is just wrong. It's wrong in many ways. It might be considered morally wrong, but it's also wrong in the sense that everyone is going to get stuck in some technology. Everyone in this room, even all my students. They don't believe it, but it's true. Okay, and so let's look at it, actually, let's illustrate it. Here we have the GI generation, which is my parents' parents. Then we have the silent generation. And these are the time ranges in which those generations were born. Okay, so my parents were born in the time range starting in the 20s up to the early 40s. Then there's the baby boomers, the Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z, which are the people who are babies now. Okay, and so, but the thing that's interesting is for technology purposes, for technology design purposes, is not when they were born, but when they came of age. And the year, what we talk about is the years 10 to 25. So if you look at that, the span of time in which the GI generation was between 10 and 25 is this span. The span of time between when the silent generation, my parents were, between 10 and 25 is this span, etc. So that's baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z. So keep that in mind. So let's now go to a new graph in which we take these spans of coming of age times and we put them on this. And now what we put up here, oh, okay, let me back up. I made a mistake.
Jeff, you just have a couple minutes.
Okay, so all I want to say here is that these are, researchers have identified certain times and time periods in which certain technologies have been prevalent. So there's mechanical, electromechanical, analog, electronic, personal computer, web and search, and e-commerce, digital music, and social media. And we don't know when these are going to end, so I put question marks there. If you superimpose on those coming of age years of those generations, what you see is that the GI generation grew up in a mix of mechanical equipment and electromechanical. Those Hoover vacuum cleaners are in electromechanical, okay? So then the silent generation, my parents spanned from electromechanical to analog electronic. Boomers, that's me, analog electronic mostly up into personal computer and basic internet, and then Generation X, millennial, and Generation Z, okay? So these are the technologies they grew up with are the ones they're gonna get stuck in. And anything in the future of that is going to perplex them and confuse them and confound them. So basically, my parents grew up with this, but now they're being faced with this, and this. And the thing that's interesting about these technologies is, look at this. It's all there on the front of that TV set. It's all there on that phone. You don't have to navigate in a user interface. I'll be done in
you're
a
good.
minute. You don't have to navigate in these user interfaces. You don't have to go from one place to another, from one screen. There are no screens. It's all there, okay? But in a Tesla car, you can go from that screen to that screen. Okay, so you have to learn how to navigate from one place to another. The same is true of your cell phone. That's one screen, that's another screen. Same is true of your computer, all right? So all I basically want to say is that people have trouble with the technology they didn't grow up with. And any tech later than their technology generation is going to be problematic for them. The final thing I want to say is most of us, in addition to all of that, most of us experience age-related changes in these things: vision, motor control, speech and hearing, cognition, knowledge, and attitude. So I'm going to skip this slide and basically put this slide up, which is a summary of what's I've just said, and point you to the book if you're interested. Thank you.
I'm retired now, but I was a computer programmer in my career, and what I found the problem was not the design per se, but testing, that people roll out new things without ever exposing a user to them, and then go, oh, why isn't it working? Why doesn't he understand what I meant? Firefox pushed a major update today. I closed the browser, and 10 minutes later opened it again, blam, the whole screen's different. Took me half an hour to figure out where things were. What the bleep are they thinking? They cannot have shown that to a user. I just don't believe they did. I think it's some kid sitting in a cubicle saying, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, well, I've worked in the computer field as a designer for a number of years, and one of the problems that I often face at the companies that I've consulted for is that there is an attitude similar to what you just described, which is, okay, we have to ship it next week, it's got to go out the door. We don't really have time to do the usability testing on the people who this is aimed at. We hired you as a good designer. We expect you to design it right the first time. And I say, well, look, part of the reason I'm a good designer is that I do test on people. And so we're going to test before we put this out the door. I don't care if you don't want to.
Good for you.
So, any other questions?
I will go back to the slide that was about booking tours.
Okay,
And you said that because that person gave up, they lost a customer. So now we live in an age of surveillance where every move is being tracked.
uh-huh,
So I'm putting that responsibility on the company. They know who clicked, they know who called, so they can call back if they care about retrieving
that person.
Right.
Right. Well, in some cases, they know if that person registered and was a registered user, yes, they will know who that person is. And they'll know actually that they went to this stage of the process and then abandoned it. But if you're just a browser and you haven't actually signed up with Road Scholar or with Grand Circle Travel or whatever, they won't know. They just know that you came in from a website somewhere in California. So.
And I have another question that is more like social cultural. So you said at the beginning that more people are going to live longer. So we are not catching up in terms of their productivity because you are still going to retire at a certain age, and after that retirement you might have 30 or 40 years that you still are alive.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we planning for it, and who is really responsible for it?
Planning? Well, let's see. I've seen a number of proposals. One is that people retire later, but of course, there's also a push against that because younger people, there are more younger people as the population grows. There's more younger people, and they want those jobs, and so they don't want older people hanging on to the jobs for long. It could be argued that there's a shrinking number of jobs because what I read today in today's paper that in 10 years almost all delivery trucks will have no drivers, right? So certain kinds of jobs are going to go away, and so that reduces the number of jobs available. And of course, young people in their childbearing ages are going to want those jobs. So yeah, so I don't know exactly how to answer your question. We can talk maybe afterwards.
What was on that screen that said the good things about aging?
Yeah.
I want to see that.
There are different kinds of intelligence. There's what's called crystallized and there's fluid intelligence. Pretty good evidence that fluid intelligence decreases. That's called fluid intelligence is ability to solve the novel problems. And higher crystallized intelligence is knowledge, basically, how much you know. And of course, it goes up monotonically as you get older. And also, people who are older have higher vocabularies. That's part of this. More real-world experience to draw from, less tendency to worry, higher rates of life satisfaction, senior discounts, and it's better than living longer is better than the alternative, I guess. This one is kind of interesting, more real-world experience to draw from. Studies have shown that if you put people in a situation where you put them on Google and you say search for something, younger people are better than older people, that is to say faster, at searching for well-specified results. Find a sink brush, a dish brush for less than $25. But it turns out that because of the knowledge and vocabulary that they possess, older adults are actually better than younger adults at doing ill-defined search tasks. Find a vacation you would like. Find a bike trip to Europe.
We have time for one more question.
I get the impression that there are people that are reading this book and designing for convenience and usability. I also get the impression that there are some people over there that purposely want you to click on something that has nothing to do with what you want, but will make them money.
Right, well, one of the things that we talk about in this book is that especially with older adults, so as people grow older, they also become more skeptical and less gullible. And so one of the things that we warn against is that if your website or your service, online service, doesn't engender trust in your users, then you will find that people will drop away in droves, okay, especially older adults. So we talk about how it's best to actually have your information or your online service be trustworthy. So for example, one of the examples we see is, have you ever seen these articles where there's an article and there are words that are underlined in the article, but if you click on them, you think it would go to the definition of that word or another article about that topic, but in fact it goes to an ad? That is not going to, that's not going to build your trust in that magazine service. And so what our guidelines do here is encourage technology designers to build the trust of their users. Whether they all agree with that as a goal is not in my control. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take this off. You want to move this over?
Yeah, we're gonna move it over.
Whatever it
I
is.
appreciate it. I don't want to trip on your board. Let me pull that out of the thing.
Laptop. Okay, we're all done.
Thank you very much. Where's this one? Okay, let's make sure it's doing its thing. You want to try and click through? No, okay. All right, you want to introduce yourself? Okay, I'll wait till it. Also, there's brownies and coffee and all that, so please grab some if you like.